The United States is currently at stage 5 of a 7-stage collapse pattern that has already destroyed 3 global superpowers throughout history, following the exact same sequence of military overextension, currency debasement, debt spirals, loss of productive capacity, and social decay that brought down the Spanish Empire, British Empire, and Soviet Union. Look around you right now. The signs are everywhere, but most people refuse to see them. Empty factories where American manufacturing once thrived. Military bases scattered across the globe that we can barely afford to maintain. A currency that loses value every year while our government prints more money to pay bills it cannot cover. These are not random problems. They are symptoms of a pattern that has played out 3 times before in modern history, and each time it has ended the same way. Complete collapse. Every empire believes it is different. Every superpower thinks the rules do not apply to them. Every dominant civilization assumes its power will last forever. But history teaches a brutal lesson. No empire escapes the mathematics of decline. When you spend more than you produce, when you extend beyond your capacity, when you debase your money to cover your debts, the sequence becomes inevitable. And that sequence has 7 distinct stages. Stage 1 is military overextension. The empire spreads its forces across the world, taking on commitments it cannot sustain. Stage 2 is currency debasement. The government reduces the real value of its money to pay for expenses it cannot afford through taxation alone. Stage 3 is the debt spiral. Borrowing becomes constant, then desperate, then impossible to repay. Stage 4 is loss of productive capacity. The empire stops making things and starts importing everything. Stage 5 is social decay. Trust collapses, institutions fail, and the best people leave. Stage 6 is loss of reserve currency status. Other nations abandon the empire's money and seek alternatives. Stage 7 is complete collapse, not gradual decline, but sudden implosion. This pattern destroyed the Spanish Empire between 1550 and 1650. It destroyed the British Empire between 1914 and 1970. It destroyed the Soviet Union between 1945 and 1991. And right now, the United States has completed the first rapidly 5 stages and is moving toward stage 6. Spain learned this lesson first. In the 16th century, they controlled more wealth than any nation in history. Spanish galleons brought home hundreds of tons of silver annually from the mines of the Americas. The Spanish real was the global reserve currency. Every merchant in Europe wanted Spanish silver. Every king envied Spanish power, and Spanish leaders believed this made them invincible. They were wrong. King Philip II used Spain's wealth to fight wars on 4 continents simultaneously, against the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, against France and German states in Europe, against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against England on the seas. The military cost consumed half of Spain's revenue, but the silver kept flowing, so they kept spending. Then came the debasement. Spanish mints began mixing copper into silver coins. A coin that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75% copper. The face value remained the same, but merchants could see the difference. They stopped accepting Spanish coins at full value. Inflation exploded across the empire. Spain borrowed constantly from Italian and German bankers to fund their wars. Between 1557 and 1596, they declared bankruptcy 4 times in 40 years. Each bankruptcy was followed by promises of reform. Each reform was followed by more borrowing and more spending. The debt spiral had begun. Meanwhile, something devastating happened to Spanish production. When you have unlimited money from silver mines, why grow food when you can import it? Why build ships when you can buy them? Why innovate when you can simply purchase what you need? Spanish nobility considered work beneath them. Manufacturing declined. Agriculture stagnated. All the silver that flowed into Spain from the Americas flowed right back out to pay for French wine, Italian silk, and Dutch manufactured goods. By 1600, Spain produced almost nothing. They had become a conduit for wealth, not a creator of it. When the silver mines began to deplete, when production dropped, the entire system collapsed. Crime exploded in Madrid. Productive citizens emigrated to France, England, and the Netherlands. Spain lost Portugal in 1640, lost the Netherlands by 1650, and by 1700 had become a shell of its former self. Britain followed the exact same pattern 3 centuries later. In 1900, the British Empire controlled 25% of the world's land surface and 400 million subjects. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. London was the financial center of the world. The sun never set on British territory. But Britain had military commitments everywhere: India, Africa, the Middle East, China, the Pacific, the Caribbean. When World War I erupted in 1914, Britain faced a choice: stay neutral and preserve the empire, or fight and risk everything. They chose to fight. The war cost Britain over $40 billion, equivalent to $1 trillion today. They borrowed heavily from the United States, transforming from creditor to debtor. After the war, Britain tried to maintain the pound's value by returning to the gold standard at pre-war rates. The problem was that the pound value was over British exports became too expensive. Manufacturing declined. Unemployment rose. By 1931, they could no longer defend the currency. Britain abandoned the gold standard and the pound lost 25% of its value overnight. World War II finished what World War I had started. Another $120 billion in costs, more borrowing from America. By 1945, Britain owed more than their entire annual economic output. They had won the war but lost the empire. In 1947, they gave up India. Over the next 20 years, they lost Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the Caribbean. The pound kept falling, from $4.03 in 1940 to $2.40 in 1970. The global reserve currency had become a regional currency. The Soviet Union demonstrated how quickly the pattern can accelerate. After World War II, they emerged as a nuclear superpower with massive conventional forces. They controlled Eastern Europe, launched satellites, and competed with America on every continent. Soviet leaders believed communism would bury capitalism. They believed central planning was the future. But the Soviet Union spent 15 to 20% of their economic output on the military. They had to match American technology and American reach with an economy a fraction of the size. They prod Vietnam, amped up Cuba, supported Syria and North Korea, fought in Afghanistan, and countered American influence everywhere. The costs were unsustainable. The Soviet economy stopped growing in the 1970s. Factories produced inferior goods. Farms failed repeatedly. The ruble was never a real currency. It could not be exchanged internationally. Even Soviet citizens preferred dollars when they could get them. When oil prices collapsed in the 1980s, Soviet gold reserves began depleting. They were running out of real money. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Eastern Europe abandoned the Soviet system. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, East Germany departed in a single year. The Soviet government was too broke to stop them. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. 900 days from the fall of the Berlin Wall to complete dissolution. No war, no invasion, just economic implosion. A superpower with 30,000 nuclear weapons collapsed from internal financial failure. 3 empires, 3 collapses, the same 7-stage pattern every time. And now the United States is deep into that sequence, moving faster than any empire before us toward the same inevitable conclusion. We have already completed 5 of the 7 stages that destroyed Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union, and the acceleration toward stages 6 and 7 is happening faster than any previous empire collapse in history. Our military overextension makes Spain's 4-continent wars look modest by comparison. 750 military bases spread across 80 countries, troops deployed in 150 nations, defense commitments to NATO, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and dozens of other allies. An $850 billion annual military budget that exceeds the next 10 countries combined. Yet recruitment is falling, equipment is aging, and we cannot respond to multiple simultaneous crises. If China moves on Taiwan while Russia pushes into NATO territory and Iran closes the Persian Gulf, our forces are spread too thin to handle all 3. The mathematics of overextension are identical to every failed empire before us. Currency debasement accelerated after Nixon severed the dollar's link to gold in 1971. Since 2000, our money supply has increased by 400%. Since 2020 alone, we have created over 6 trillion new dollars. The purchasing power of the dollar has declined 98% since 1971. We are not mixing copper into silver coins like the Spanish did. We are simply printing unlimited paper currency. The mechanism differs, but the result remains the same. Each new dollar reduces the value of every existing dollar. Our debt spiral has reached mathematical impossibility. $36 trillion in total debt represents 120% of our entire economic output. Interest payments alone approach $1 trillion annually. We spend more servicing debt than funding our military. We borrow money to pay interest on previous borrowing during peacetime in a growing economy. This defines a debt spiral. Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times in 40 years. Britain borrowed until collapse. The Soviet Union ran out of real money. We are following the identical trajectory. Manufacturing has been systematically dismantled and shipped overseas. We design products, provide financing, and consume goods, but we no longer produce the physical items that sustain modern civilization. Our trade deficit exceeds $800 billion annually. We import more manufactured goods than we export by ratios that would have shocked previous empires. Critical supply chains for medicine, electronics, steel, and even military components depend entirely on foreign production. When the Spanish silver stopped flowing from the Americas, their import-dependent economy collapsed. When our dollars stopped flowing to foreign producers, the same result awaits. Social decay manifests in measurable statistics that mirror the final stages of previous empires. Trust in institutions has fallen to historic lows across every demographic. Violent crime rates are rising in major cities. Homelessness has reached crisis levels in states that once represented American prosperity. Drug overdose deaths exceed 100,000 annually. Fertility rates have collapsed below replacement levels. Political dysfunction prevents basic governance. Infrastructure projects take decades that once required years. We cannot build, cannot agree, cannot function as a cohesive society. The velocity of our decline exceeds every previous empire. Spain took a century to collapse after reaching stage 5. Britain required 50 years. The Soviet Union needed 45 years. We have compressed the same deterioration into 2 decades and accelerated dramatically since 2020. Every crisis response has worsened our fundamental position. Every solution has created larger problems. Every reform has increased the dysfunction. Stage 6 approaches with clear warning signs that previous empires ignored until too late. BRICS nations are developing payment systems that bypass the dollar. Central banks worldwide are purchasing gold at rates not seen since the 1970s. China and Russia conduct bilateral trade in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepts yuan for oil sales. These are not isolated incidents. They represent systematic efforts to create alternatives to dollar-denominated trade. When stage 6 begins, the process becomes irreversible. Foreign nations will dump dollar reserves, causing the currency to flood back into our domestic economy. Import costs will skyrocket, while our ability to purchase foreign goods collapses. The military commitments we cannot afford today will become impossible to maintain. Allies will hedge their bets. Enemies will test our resolve. The reserve currency status that has subsidized our deficit spending for decades will evaporate. Stage 7 follows quickly after Stage 6 begins, not gradual decline over generations, but sudden implosion within years or even months. The Soviet Union demonstrated this timeline. From economic superpower to non-existence in 900 days, no external invasion, no military defeat. Pure financial collapse triggered by the mathematics of unsustainable commitments meeting reality. The pattern has repeated 3 times with identical results. Each empire believed it was different. Each convinced itself that unique advantages would prevent collapse. Spain had unlimited silver. Britain had the largest empire in history. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons and central planning. All failed because the mathematics of imperial overextension cannot be overcome by wishful thinking or technological advantages. Our technological sophistication will not save us from economic laws that destroyed previous superpowers. Our nuclear arsenal will not prevent currency collapse. Our global influence will not eliminate debt spirals. The same forces that brought down Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union operate today with even greater intensity because our scale of overextension exceeds theirs. The acceleration continues. Every month we add more debt. Every year we extend more military commitments. Every crisis response involves printing more money and assuming more obligations. We are not walking toward stages 6 and 7. We are sprinting. When collapse comes, it will surprise everyone who refuses to study the pattern. Just as Spanish nobles could not believe their silver would run out. Just as British leaders could not accept that empire was ending. Just as Soviet officials could not imagine their system failing. Americans today cannot conceive that our dominance is temporary. But the pattern does not care about beliefs. It operates according to mathematical principles that have destroyed every empire that ignored them. The mathematical certainty of imperial collapse renders hope irrelevant when a nation has already completed 5 of 7 stages that destroyed every previous superpower because the pattern operates independent of human will or technological advancement. The time for prevention has passed. We are no longer debating whether America will follow the same trajectory as Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. We are calculating how quickly stages 6 and 7 will unfold. Every metric that matters points toward acceleration, not recovery. Consider the velocity of change since 2020. In 4 years, we have added more debt than the previous 2 decades combined. We have printed more money than existed in the entire economy before 2008. We have committed to more military interventions while our recruitment numbers collapse to historic lows. The pace is not sustainable because it was never designed to be sustainable. Foreign nations are not waiting for our collapse. They are preparing for it. China's Belt and Road Initiative creates trade networks that bypass American control. Central banks accumulate gold reserves at rates unseen since the breakdown of Bretton Woods. These are not defensive moves. They are positioning for a post-American financial order. The 7-stage collapse pattern that destroyed Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union is now playing out in America at unprecedented speed, with stages 6 and 7 approaching faster than any previous empire experienced. The mathematics are unforgiving, and the timeline is compressing. Spain took a century to fall after reaching our current stage. Britain needed 50 years. The Soviet Union required 45. We are moving through the sequence in decades, not generations. History doesn't repeat, but if you ignore the pattern, it will crush you all the same.